What do you think of when you hear those notes? For me, they feel peaceful, harmonious, like they float in the air from the speaker to your eardrums. They take me back to a simpler time, a time where I didn't have any stress, any worries, every day felt different. They feel grand and inspiring. I think for myself, and for some of you listening, you probably have similar feelings. This song is called Still Alive, sung by Swedish pop star Lisa Miskovsky, and I don't think it would feel out of place on some kind of meditation or inspiring music playlist on Spotify. The piano, the synth, everything about it fills you with some kind of energy. But instead, this was the title theme for the video game Mirror's Edge, and it has no right being as good as it is. I felt all of these feelings because when this game came out, I was a teenager. I didn't have to work, I only had school to worry about, and video games was pretty much how I spent the majority of my time. I heard this song again recently, and I was reminded about all of those feelings. The result was that I just had to play Mirror's Edge again. It must have been, like 4, maybe 5 years since I last played it, and wait a minute. It's been 15 years? While I'm busy staring at the ceiling and reflecting how I've spent my life, you may be as surprised as I am to hear Mirror's Edge is 15 years old. I mean, just look at it. To this day it still looks gorgeous and probably wouldn't look out of place as a game released in the past year. To be honest, it probably looks even better than a lot of the games released over the past few years. And it's not just my nostalgia talking, which I know I can be guilty of. Other games released around the same time like Grand Theft Auto 4, Devil May Cry 4, Fable 2, and Battlefield Bad Company all look good in their own right, but then, compared to Mirror's Edge, well, Mirror's Edge wins every time. Before I go into that, given that you're watching this video, I'm going to make the assumption that you've played Mirror's Edge before, or that you don't really care about spoilers, because I'm going to spoil the plot, and to be honest, it's your own fault if you're upset that the plot for a 15-year-old game has been ruined for you. While I'm at it, Bruce Willis was dead the entire time, the apes were on Earth the whole time, and Snape kills Dumbledore. If you don't like it, the best way to get back at me would be to subscribe. I hate it when people do that. It's horrible. Hate it. Awful. Ugh. But back to the point. There is something about Mirror's Edge that makes it timeless for myself and so many others. And how it looks feeds into that. First-person games around this time were mostly shooters. Halo 3, Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare, and Fallout 3 for example. All of them were dark and gritty, mostly in look but also in themes. Fallout 3 had you traversing a nuclear wasteland, seeing humanity at its absolute worst. Halo 3 had you coping with the potential extinction of the human race, and traversing past known space to another galaxy for the very slim chance to prevent it. Call of Duty 4 has you die in a nuclear explosion, but only just after you crawl from the wreckage of your downed helicopter to see the devastation and death this explosion has caused, let you limp away feebly, only allowing you to succumb to the inevitable. Mirror's Edge, on the other hand, is really bright. As some critics have said, sometimes it was blindingly too bright. You'd be running through a cramped hallway, only to bust through a red fire door, and all of a sudden it's like a nuke has been set off outside and your retinas are dribbling down your face. The entire game is set against a brilliant white city, with primary colours illuminating the office spaces and scaffolding and subway systems that you run through. And much like these colours, prominently standing out from the concrete jungle, Mirror's Edge stands out amongst its contemporaries because of how different it was. For starters, it wasn't a first-person shooter. There were shooting elements to the game, sure, but I'd argue the first-person shooting elements were actually some of the weakest parts of the game. Primarily, Mirror's Edge was an adventure game, and your method of adventuring was running. Running across rooftops, office spaces, sewer drains, construction sites, subway systems, cranes and trains. Pretty much anywhere a foot can go, you can run across it. I don't think this perspective of first-person parkour had ever been explored before in a video game. Other games had come before Mirror's Edge, exploring parkour, using the environment in ways beyond the ability of your average person in order to reach objectives. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time from 2003 is the earliest game I can remember playing that explored parkour in a 3D space, letting you wall run and jump around the environment. This title paved the way for Ubisoft's 2007 game Assassin's Creed, and I don't need to tell you how well that went down. All these games let you explore the environment with your character's body, jumping, running, and swinging, but all from a third-person camera. With the excess Assassin's Creed had in 2007, parkour was hyping up in the mainstream media. Although most people hadn't heard of parkour or freerunning, games like these and movies had definitely helped to popularise it, and it was becoming one of the cool new trends in media. With this in mind, Mirror's Edge was announced at just the right time to stand out from other first-person games, not just in concept, but in sound and look as well. The stark contrast of colour in each level, along with the lighting system, gives every level of Mirror's Edge a unique feel. Some rooftops are just that, rooftops. There's only so much you can do, but you go barreling through a door and all of a sudden you think, oh yeah, I know this level. And it's this stylised approach that makes Mirror's Edge still look amazing today. You spend the game running past everything as fast as possible, and so it makes sense that the developers didn't put a lot of detail in to be scrutinised and picked apart by the player. It's only if you really slow down and look closely the game will begin to show its real age. These water textures look dated for 2008. The streets are almost completely devoid of people and cars, which can be quite jarring. And when they do show up, well, it's probably a good thing they're far away, because they do not look good, even from this far away on the rooftop. If you stare into the distance long enough, the cloud textures and far landscape textures are very flat, blurred, and are basically screaming JPEG. These are all the things that you wouldn't notice on a normal playthrough, so they don't really take you out of the game. But if you're like me, and just like to exist in the world, it can be quite distracting. Accompanying the sound of breathing and heavy footsteps as you jump from roof to roof is the gentle hum of the city. Air conditioning units vibrate as you run past. The hustle and bustle of the city is heard from the street below, along with the almost imperceptible synth music to accompany the ambient sounds of the world. The mix is just right to pull you in and make you feel invested, alongside the amazing feeling of stringing together several moves to traverse the environment. When the police chase you, heavy techno beats start playing, and you hear bullets rushing past you, glass breaks, doors crash open, and you can audibly hear yourself being chased. It's nerve-wracking as you jump across gaps, slam through doors, only to see guards rush in from the other side. This is where Mirror's Edge is at its best, when you're chaining move after move together. To traverse the world so quick and hit precise jumps, all while avoiding cops and bullets, feels amazing. Everything seems to flow like a hot knife through butter. And then... whoops, I fell. Better try again.
You're in the elevator shaft. Listen, there should be an entrance to the ventilation system somewhere.
The look and sound while running in Mirror's Edge is the best thing about the game. When it works, it really works. The problems are where it doesn't work, and as great and harrowing as the falling sound is, it begins to grate on you after the 5th or 6th time hearing it on the same jump. This is where Mirror's Edge begins to show its age. Sometimes you'll try to run across a wall, and inexplicably, you just don't run on the wall and fall to your death. Sometimes you'll chain some jumps together, and on the final jump, you just won't grab the ledge, and again, will fall to your death. It's a shame because of how good the game feels when it all comes together, only to be let down by the game not recognising that you're trying to grab a pipe. It doesn't help that the checkpointing system can be a bit hit and miss. Sometimes you'll get plenty and start close by, sometimes you'll just have to start at the beginning of a section. Other times it'll just skip ahead and you'll wonder how you even got here. Related to this, the developers obviously knew that running was the core gameplay mechanic. It's the game's unique selling point, it's the reason you'd buy this game as opposed to any other first-person game at the time. So the amount of times you get pulled out of running and puzzle solving with parkour to do things like, I don't know, fight some guards, ride in an elevator, or turn a red handle, turn another red handle, and then turn another red handle literally seconds after you've just turned the previous red handle. It's moments like this that make me think, why? I can understand the elevators and door handles to some extent. Because you're moving so fast through the levels, I think this is probably just a loading screen disguised as part of the environment. and while you're riding in the elevator or turning that damn red handle, the game is secretly deloading the previous part of the mission and loading the next. At least in the elevator, you get these news bulletins to read more about the world you're in. Is your child running? Find out tonight at 8 PM on Fox News. The combat, on the other hand, just feels like a missed opportunity. In the game, you play as Faith, a female runner. You're not a soldier. You're athletic, sure, but your primary weapon is speed. Not a gun, not your fists. It stands to reason if you come across a group of guards on a rooftop or in an office building that you should use your parkour skills to wall run past them and around the corner, jump to another rooftop, and leave them scratching their heads about how they've been royally mugged off. That's what would make sense. What doesn't make sense is why the game makes it so hard to do this outside of scripted events. So many times you'll reach an area with 4 or 5 guards, and if you try to run past them, you will die. Over and over again. If you try to take them on with hand-to-hand combat, you might get one guy, but then will quickly die in a hail of gunfire from the others. The fastest and easiest way to get through these sections is to disarm the first guard you come across, then use his gun to kill the rest of the guards, and then climb a ledge or a pipe to carry on the mission. This really just makes no sense to me, because it's not like the FPS mechanics are actually very good to start with. Unless you're 6 foot away from an enemy, all of your bullets will miss. And it's really inconsistent how often you'll be hit from enemy gunfire. Once you shoot a gun a handful of times, it runs out of bullets and you discard the entire weapon. For the amount of times you have to do this, it would make sense for your character to carry a gun at all times. But no, I guess she just drops it so she can have the pure thrill of staring down the whites of a man's eyes as she flips him off a rooftop and takes his gun. It's a cruel world after all. Don't get me wrong, the takedowns in this game are great and are really fun to do, but that just makes it worse because they've made some really great melee combat moves, but you're encouraged to only use them once per fight and just shoot everyone else. This is only compounded by how difficult it can be to know where your escape point is in a firefight. There's a mechanic in Mirror's Edge called runner vision, where the route you should take to progress each level is baked into the environment by colouring parts of the route red. This means you should go this way. Red wood wall means run across it. Red pipe means climb it. This colouring isn't super ubiquitous, so it's not like you're having your hand held throughout the entire game, which is good, but when you're trying to parkour around some enemies, it just becomes tedious running into a dead end to circle back on yourself, only to get shot and killed because you wasted time so enemies can surround you, only for this cycle to repeat several times. Long story short, the fighting sections in this game are not great. What I think happened is that the developers initially planned for guns to be used in the game, evidenced by the dev commentary of early Faith concepts showing her carrying her own gun. I then think they knew that gunplay was not going to be the focus, and so they stripped it out entirely. Then at some point in development, studio execs or the publisher came in and said, you can't have a first-person game without shooting. It's what the people want. And to be fair to the execs, they'd be right. In 2008, everyone was still playing Call of Duty World at War, Modern Warfare, or Halo 3. As a result, the devs would have put back in the FPS elements, but these are really half-baked and just feel rushed. Probably because they were. Despite all this, I still love Mirror's Edge. Like I said, when it works, it really, really works. And the way you feel like a fugitive the entire time you're playing is exhilarating. But again, as long as everything works. Which is a shame because of how often it just doesn't. I believe this is just a limitation of the technology at the time. We've since gone on to the new Assassin's Creed games where you can climb anywhere at any time, and it works really well. Even Brink had great parkour mechanics, for all 12 people that played that game. With that being said, Mirror's Edge was a breath of fresh air to the FPS genre that it really needed. And it really showcased how the first-person perspective can be expanded upon to incorporate gameplay elements so much more interesting and fun than just being the vessel from which to shoot things. Mirror's Edge also encourages exploration if you want to take things a little bit slower. You can find 30 of these yellow bags throughout the story mode, which act as collectibles and unlock little bits of concept art, along with developer commentary to go with it, which is really interesting. There are small details hidden throughout the world too, where you can tell the devs were just having a lot of fun. Like these notes in a janitor's office, where there's a handwritten Employee of the Month award, or this Easter egg of a giant rat running through the streets. When you're chasing a guy around a corner and he ducks into an elevator, he waves at you with a smug grin as the door closes and you think, God damn, this guy's an arsehole. My favourite thing about the game is when you run off a ledge, do a quick turn and flip off any guards chasing you. There's no purpose to this other than it's just fun. And I love that. These things are really fun, but also contribute to the tonally inconsistent nature of Mirror's Edge. You have a bright, gorgeous vista of a city, and fun little moments of levity, contrasted against a story that is supposed to be very dark and oppressive. You haven't heard me mention the plot of Mirror's Edge much, because it's somehow both so convoluted but at the same time bare bones, that it's just confusing and not really worth much of a mention. As simply as I can explain it, the city you play in is an authoritarian nightmare. The mayor and police rule the city with an iron fist and monitor all web traffic and messages, including private messages between regular people. Sounds completely far-fetched, right? That would never happen. As a result, corporate elites, politicians, and just random criminals in general, use runners to carry messages and packages around the city without them being subject to interception by the government. It's a really cool idea. Robert Pope is a political rival of the mayor that is running to abolish the authoritarian rule of the city. He is assassinated, and Faith's sister, Kate, who is also a member of the city's police force, is framed for the murder. Why? Well, the reason given is that it had to be a cop. Why did it have to be a cop? Shut up, who knows, they never tell you. The rest of the game you spend trying to find out who killed Pope and to free Kate from custody. And that's without even mentioning the secretive Project Icarus, which is just a project to train cops in parkour to chase down the runners and stop them once and for all. The story at a very high level sounds really interesting, but I've had to cut a lot of the events out to make it understandable. For example, why does going to a warehouse lead you to a secret underground James Bond villain lair that exists only to hide a parkour gym where they train cops in running? Why does this need an underground lair? And surely framing the police for the murder of a politician is only going to undermine the rule of the city, since, you know, the police would just be outright murdering known political rivals of the mayor. And even how the murder takes place is just ridiculous. Kate says, in this well-lit by natural light room, the lights went out, and when they came back on, Pope was dead with my gun. Completely ignoring the fact that this room would not have changed in lighting at all when the lights went out, because of these fricking floor-to-ceiling windows. You have to suspend your disbelief a lot in this game for the sake of the story, and to be honest, it's better if you just don't pay too much attention. I think again there must have been a late change in development to the story, because the developer commentary hints that at one stage the yellow bags played a much larger role in the game. And this makes sense since the first levels have you delivering one, but then they get relegated to just be collectible items. Like the devs just didn't want to get rid of them after they spent so much time working on them. They even released a collector's edition that came with its own yellow runner bag, so it's clear they were meant to be important and significant. The story and writing, much like the gameplay, suffers from very high highs and very low lows. Your handler, Merc, is probably the only well-written character in the game, so they kill him off. Kate's boss in the police, Lieutenant Miller, helps you out secretly at the risk of his job and probably jail time. It's a great potential character arc. He wears a fully white outfit, along with white hair, pretty much telling you this guy is pure, he wants to do the right thing. You meet him again and everything is tinged red, telling you he's gone bad, which is then what happens. You meet him one final time for his redemption, and he helps you out again. All of these meetings are about 60 seconds each, so you don't really invest in Miller, which is a shame. You chase an assassin through a level, seeing them on other rooftops of adjacent buildings, only to have it culminate in one of the worst boss fights ever in a video game. I'll just let you sit with this for a while, since I had to suffer through it. These are just a few of the almost really great moments in Mirror's Edge. It's like they had everything in one place, but maybe just not enough time to execute it well enough. And that's reflected in how the game ends too. It ends abruptly, with you storming the skyscraper that is the mayor's office, parkouring your way through the ventilation systems and offices, killing scores of guards, since apparently Faith is John Halo himself, only to get to the rooftop helipad where Kate is being held prisoner, and you get surrounded by guards. You make one final leap of faith, kick Jackknife out of the helicopter, wonder who he is because the game doesn't really explain, jump out of the helicopter back to the roof, only for all the guards to have disappeared, hug Kate, and then kick back as the title song crescendos in the background. It's okay, I guess. What finishing the game does, however, is unlock a bunch of time trials where you can play the best part of Mirror's Edge: running. These are based on the story levels, only there's no guards, no cutscenes, no combat, just you booking it across rooftops to beat a timer, and it feels great. You can assess new routes, you quickly reset so you can try sections over and over to work out how to shave off time. It's really great, and the developers knew this, since the only DLC for Mirror's Edge was a specific mode for more time trials. There's even a dedicated speedrun mode with times to beat for each level. Mirror's Edge feels like a game that might come from an indie studio nowadays. It's got an extremely memorable art style and unique for the time gameplay mechanics, which subsequent games took and expanded upon. It's disappointing how many times Mirror's Edge shows its potential and falls flat in the areas of combat, story, and occasionally the parkour. But the rest of the time, the game is brilliant, holding up in terms of look and the majority of the gameplay, even 15 years later. To put it into perspective, Mirror's Edge still feels great in 2023 for a 15-year-old game. If you look back 15 years from 2008, when Mirror's Edge was released, you're looking at 1993's Doom or The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. These are both great genre-defining games, but they are definitely retro games, and even in 2008, people probably would have called them retro. Would I consider Mirror's Edge retro now? Probably not, because of how close it still feels to modern games. And I wouldn't just say it's a game good for its time either. I think it still holds its own as a fun standalone game now. I wouldn't pay much for it, since it's only around 8 hours long, but it's super cheap to pick up, since it performed really well. It sold over 2 million copies. I would recommend this game to anyone, unless you get motion sickness, in which case, this video must have been really hard for you. Sorry. Do 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 do. I'm still alive. I'm still alive and I cannot apologize. Oh man, it's so dumb.